My name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and welcome to your detailed forecast update for December 12th, 2024. We have a lot to go through once again today, including some very heavy rainfall across the far north and the central coast of Queensland. We're also going to touch on the chance of severe thunderstorms down in the southeast and the south central parts of Queensland. We'll give a tropical forecast for the Northern Territory and Western Australia. We'll also give a heatwave update for Western Australia. And we're going to talk about those two tropical lows offshore from Western Australia and the one in the Gulf of Carpentaria. So we've got a lot to get through today. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing. But let's get stuck straight into things today, up into the far north of Queensland. We're going to go from north to south in the complete opposite direction to what we normally go on this channel, but we have had some significant rainfall overnight, especially into the Cairns area, where 145 millimetres has fallen at Cairns Airport, and multiple locations, especially into the southern areas of Cairns and along the northwest, have also picked up some very substantial rainfall accumulations overnight. So very good to see, especially considering Cairns doesn't normally get as much rainfall as the remaining locations up in the far north of Queensland, but there is quite a lot more on the way, and as such there is going to be the chance of flooding. So today's Thursday. We've been talking about this rainfall event lasting between Wednesday and Saturday, so we're nearly halfway through it. This morning we have woken up to some substantial showers moving through to the Townsville area and some good rainfall accumulations around the Mackay area as well. In fact, areas around Mackay picked up about 70 or 80 millimetres overnight, bang on the forecast from what was expected. The falls further down the central Queensland coastline will continue to ease off throughout the course of today, but I will get to those in just a few moments. So throughout the course of today from Townsville, we are expecting plenty of thunderstorms to fire up into the afternoon and evening, especially further inland out towards Charters Towers and Cardwell. We'll also see some decent thunderstorms around Ingham and Cardwell, and maybe extending into the Atherton tablelands about as far north as Mareeba. The thunderstorms likely won't penetrate too far north or too close to the coastline camps. Not really expecting too much in the way of thunderstorms in the early afternoon before they might get some residual showers later on tonight. And again, that's exactly what they got last night. They got 150 millimetres, and I'm not saying that Cairns is in for another 150 millimetres of rainfall, but later on tonight there will certainly be some thunderstorms in the vicinity of Cairns that could deliver some meaningful rainfall accumulations. We certainly will need to keep an eye on that. The thunderstorms don't actually die down in the Cape York Peninsula until about midnight. You can see they really just continue to fire up till about 10 or 11 o'clock, and then finally dissipate around midnight or 1 a.m. The really concerning stuff that's going to happen is that these thunderstorms is associated with the surface trough that's going to be moving closer and closer to the coastline. Once that tail end of the surface trough gets itself over the warm waters of the Coral Sea, it's going to become a bit more of a rain funnel and a bit more of a driver for rainfall that's going to be pummeled ashore around the Townsville area. And this has been on the forecast for the last couple of days, so I want to hone into on it this now. So from tonight we are expecting a very heavy stream of rainfall to start around the Townsville area from about midnight or so, probably a little bit earlier than that, could be a little bit later, and we're just expecting this funnel of rainfall to be streamed ashore somewhere from the Ingham coastline towards about Ayr, and it looks like Townsville is going to be in that hot seat to receive those substantial rainfall accumulations. It also looks like the rainfall is going to penetrate far enough inland out towards Ravenswood and Collinsville as well. Some substantial rainfall accumulations they're expected over 3 hourly periods, and the rainfall just expected to be really heavy from this onshore flow, which will be moving very slowly in that easterly direction. So communities including Townsville, Ayr and Bond, even if the rainfall doesn't start at midnight, they're still expecting some substantial rainfall to the 9 a.m. on Friday morning. It looks like this low pressure area does weaken off as the day rolls on, and by the early afternoon hours of tomorrow you can see the low pressure area is pretty much fully offshore, and as such that rain funnel has more or less stopped. But over the 12 hours between midnight tonight and about midday tomorrow, we're expecting communities between Townsville right down to about Bond to receive some very substantial rainfall accumulations in a very short period of time, and then areas around the Proserpine, Yellowborough, Hamilton Island area, or just along the Whitsundays, expecting some substantial rainfall accumulations just over a 12-hour period. If that makes sense, the rainfall down there going to be a little bit more steady for the most part. The other forecast model is calling for pretty much neck and neck the exact same thing. What is going to be helping this system here drive all of the rainfall ashore is just those northerly winds. Classic case of an onshore flow, but it's just going to be those heavy showers that continuously fire up over the Coral Sea from the warm sea surface temperatures there, and it's just going to be a prime condition for plenty of thunderstorms to fire up, and as such some substantial rainfall accumulations are possible. Now rainfall accumulations over the next 24 hours, they're not exactly resemblant, or they are still pretty accurate on this forecast here, but you can see there will be some discrepancies between locations. Now from this rainfall event alone, at least 90 or 100 millimetres is expected for Townsville. I'd be surprised if they picked up anything less than about 50. The ballparks on the scope of uncertainty is still really large for Townsville, probably somewhere between that 50 to 120 millimetre mark, but if I was to kind of make my hunch on this, it's probably going to be on the higher end of that. The mountainous terrain along the coastline is not going to be helping those locations pick up not much rainfall. They're going to be getting plenty of the stuff, and I would be surprised once again if accumulations weren't amounting up towards 150 millimeters along some of the mountainous areas just inland and adjacent to Townsville. Air, I reckon, somewhere between the 80 and 100 millimeter mark here. It's bang on what the forecast is suggesting as well. The heaviest falls, like I said, will be further inland outside of Ravenswood and Collinsville, in the mountainous areas here. I forget the name of the dam that's out here. It gets me every single time. This is the same location that picked up close to that 1,000 millimeter deluge from Tropical Cyclone Debbie now 6 years back, I believe, 7 years back actually. And again, they're going to be picking up some substantial accumulations, the wettest part on the central Queensland coastline. The other rainfall accumulations I will get to in just a moment. So some substantial rainfall coming through here, and again, if we take a look at the drought monitoring map and the soil moisture values, they are much wetter than average across this part of central Queensland into the far north of Queensland. So this rainfall here, although it is certainly going to be welcome, it's not the most needed of rainfall, which is unfortunate because, again, I mean, we're seeing all of this rainfall streaming in here up in the far north of Queensland. We'd love to say, yes, please give us more, but we've had a very wet last couple of weeks, and as such, this rainfall here now not really making itself feel very welcome at all. In terms of the other convective forecast models as well, I mean, they're going absolutely ham on the rainfall here. They're expecting just a line of heavy showers and thunderstorms to stream ashore, and you can see this map can give you a bit of an idea on where the heaviest rainfall is expected, but I will take some of these numbers with a very heavy pinch of salt because what's this, 36 hourly rainfall accumulations are not going to be above 200 millimeters, let alone approaching 5 or 6 or even 800 millimeters that this forecast is suggesting. But this does give you a pretty good idea of where the wettest places are going to be. You can see Townsville, Ayr and Bowen just kind of the standout figures right now for really high rainfall accumulations. It brings me back to the Bureau of Meteorology. I'm not 100% sure why they're calling for only 15 millimeters, I believe, or it was 35 millimeters or something for the Townsville forecast. I think that that's just a little bit on the lighter side right now. I think the maximum that Townsville could pick up is about 80 or 90 millimeters, and I think that's a more valid and reasonable number to put on the forecast. So for Townsville, you are expecting some good rainfall over the coming couple of hours into early tomorrow morning. The rainfall is going to be very healthy there, like I said, starting from tonight and then really picking up throughout tomorrow morning. It is going to be on the western side of where this rainfall event is expected to be, so there's also that slim chance that Townsville picks up absolutely nothing in the way of rainfall, but I don't really see that being a high likelihood at this time, especially just considering the precedents of Queensland being just much wetter than what the forecast is suggesting now. So I'd be surprised if Townsville picked up next to no rainfall. So again, that's why I'm going pretty much all in on this forecast here. Like I said, I could be wrong, take it with a grain of salt and whatnot, but again, it does look more than likely that Townsville is going to pick up some good falls. And then down into the central Queensland coastline, we've got plenty of thunderstorms to talk about. Still some rainfall sitting offshore right now, some moderate showers streaming ashore around the Rockhampton area. They haven't really made it to the shore at this time, but still some okay rainfall accumulations there into the Ogmore and Rockhampton area. We've had 3-day rainfall accumulations in excess of 25 or 30 millimetres there. The rainfall, unfortunately, around Gladstone, Agnes Water and Bundaberg has been pretty disappointing from this. We were hoping about a week ago that they were going to pick up some very substantial rainfall accumulations, but nothing has materialised, unfortunately, and they are parched. They desperately need the rainfall, that's for sure. Thunderstorms expected to be very widespread further inland tonight, most likely non-severe, but they could be a couple of severe ones with some heavy rainfall and damaging winds extending inland from Glendon, Moranbah and Claremont. The thunderstorms out there will pack a punch, but they're not going to be anything too crazy. Showers then expected to pipe up in dramatic fashion, like I said, into the far north coastline between Townsville and Bowen, and then later on this into tomorrow afternoon, we'll see plenty of thunderstorms fire up along the coastline between Glendon down to about Rockhampton, Billawheeler and Agnes Water, and as such, these thunderstorms here could be potentially severe. The conditions aren't going to be primed for severe thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon into the central Queensland coastline area, and same deal with Saturday as well, even though you do get some gnarly thunderstorms that do look like they're going to bring some healthy rainfall accumulations, especially further south into the Wide Bay area on Saturday afternoon. It doesn't look like severe thunderstorms are going to be prevalent. They're going to be pretty widespread and hit and miss, and the rainfall accumulations are going to be a very difficult number to forecast to start things off, but they're also going to be pretty hit and miss around a lot of locations. 4-day rainfall accumulations along the central Queensland coastline, and this is a pretty deceptive forecast here. It's a very risky one to put in this video because it could be very wrong. So starting at Mackay, like I said, from all of that rainfall coming through over the next 24 hours, they're expecting about 130 millimetres, and that's kind of where the reliability on this forecast stops. Further south, Ogmore and Rockhampton are giving this a believable about 40 or 50 millimetres of rainfall. Again, depending on what thunderstorms they get, I think 50 millimetres for Rockhampton might be a little bit of a stretch over the next 4 days, but it is entirely entirely possible. Billawheeler about 20 millimeters or so, Dingo and Emerald somewhere between that sort of 5 and 20 millimeter mark as well, and then Agnes Water, Gladstone and Bundaberg, these poor people down here struggling for rainfall. There is some okay stuff that has been lingering on the forecast for Sunday afternoon and Monday morning, and in terms of a rainfall event here, I mean, you could almost class it as one, but the accumulations are not going to be amounting to what the forecast is suggests. I mean, the forecast here poking around at sort of that 150 millimeter mark in terms of rainfall, and I think that's just a little bit too bullish for those locations right now. I think Agnes Water over the coming couple of days will pick up next to nothing or a very low amount of rainfall. Same deal with Bundaberg and Gladstone. But the rainfall on Sunday night into Monday morning could be a little bit more of a wild card. They might get 50 millimeters or so, just depending on how the rainfall plays out. It is just a little bit too difficult to say at this time, and again, precedents suggesting to me that they're not going to pick up much in the way of rainfall at all. Remaining very hopeful for them, but cautiously optimistic with this rainfall on the forecast. 50 millimeters would be very welcome there, but it's not going to be enough to drench their absolutely parched conditions right now. And then for fun's sake, let's take a look at the 14-day rainfall accumulations across the central and far northern coast of Queensland. There's plenty of stuff on the forecast. You can see accumulations well over 300 millimeters offshore, and that's just because we're going to be seeing a week of showers beyond what we're expecting this to round out this week and this weekend. We're just going to be seeing showers and storms across the Cape York Peninsula and the central coast and the far north from about Tuesday or Wednesday, the 17th and 18th of December onwards. And as such, the rainfall accumulations there are going to amount to some pretty substantial observations. We will keep a close eye on this, but for now it doesn't look like anything too crazy is. And let's just round out the Queensland side of things down into the southeast, and it's going to be a pretty boring forecast if you want to hear about severe thunderstorms and lightning and hail and all the wazoo from the severe thunderstorms. Well, there isn't an awful lot on the forecast, especially over the coming couple of days. There really isn't too much on the forecast. From today, we might be seeing a couple of showers into the northern extremities of the Sunshine Coast, a few light showers also expected tomorrow afternoon and evening, and the chance of some thunderstorms late tomorrow night and throughout Saturday along the Sunshine Coast. There's also the chance of some thunderstorms into the scenic rim of the Gold Coast later on Saturday afternoon as well. But in terms of substantial severe thunderstorms, nothing on the forecast, not at least over the next 5 days, and in fact by extension over the next week. There's really nothing on the forecast either. We might see a couple of severe thunderstorms on the lead up to Christmas, but it looks like they might head into a bit of a 2-week dry period by the looks of things on the thunderstorm front here. But there is going to be plenty of low pressure across interior parts of Australia, and I will include this in the Queensland forecast, and even though that we're talking about South Australia here, but just take a look at the low pressure system that's going to be driving these daytime maximas into the high 40s and early 50s. Now, this low pressure system, once it gets itself over New South Wales and Queensland, is going to cause some substantial evaporation, some substantial instability in the atmosphere, and there is now the chance on the lead up to New Year's, just based off this forecast here, that there is going to be some substantial thunderstorms across interior parts of Queensland and at New South Wales. More on this stuff later on in the forecast update. Now, I've been getting quite a few comments about the Northern Territory in Western Australia and how people really want the forecast update for those locations, and I apologise that I haven't been giving it, but in terms of the Northern Territory and WA, even though the tropics are notoriously unpredictable, they do remain, in terms of a long-range forecast, very predictable. Just thunderstorms pretty much every afternoon and evening, and I know that's pretty much a cop-out for me to make in this video, but I'm going to give them a detailed forecast update, and I'm going to endeavour to do it in every forecast update that concerns them. So you can see thunderstorms persistent this afternoon as well across interior parts of the Northern Territory, even across in towards Kakadu as well. Same deal with tomorrow and Saturday. It looks like this weekend might be a little bit more of a quieter period for thunderstorms. The reason for that is the monsoon trough heading further offshore, being dragged around across Western Australia by something we'll talk about in just a few moments. But in terms of substantial rainfall accumulations across the Northern Territory, in fact, just interesting stuff in general, there really isn't an awful lot. There's going to be plenty of thunderstorms, as there always is for this time of the year, pretty much every afternoon and evening across the top end of the Northern Territory. But in terms of interesting stuff, we're going to be waiting until Christmas time to talk about a tropical low up there. More on that at the end of this video. And into the southwest of Western Australia, where we had some very warm temperatures yesterday. My personal weather station at home got to 43 degrees, very hot indeed. That would be the hottest day of the past, I think, 24 months on my personal weather station, so it has been certainly a very hot day there, and I'm sure a lot of people can testify to that as well. And it's going to be a warm start in Perth as well again today, heading to a top of 37. Some of the northern suburbs expecting a top into the 40s, northern also expecting a top of 43 degrees, so it is going to be a scorcher once again, especially as you get further further inland, although not as warm as yesterday. Temperatures were hovering around that kind of 38 to 42 degree mark and around pretty much every station around the metro area. Again, let me know how warm you got to, especially if you do live in the northern suburbs for today, and also for yesterday as well. Be interesting to see. Unfortunately, though, it looks like this hot weather is going to be replaced by some unbearable humidity across the southwest. And I know this isn't something that a lot of people are aware of, but this low pressure system, as it heads further inland, it's going to be dragging an onshore flow, which means those ocean winds are going to come through. Now, normally that means that those temperatures are expected to crash, and this is for Friday's forecast, but the low pressure system's only going to be just over the hills, and as such, the humidity values around the Perth metro area, and keep in mind this is at 1 p.m, are going to be around that 30 to 50% mark. I mean, it's not going to be as high around the Perth metro area as it will be along the coastline, but considering the temperatures are going to be 30 or into the early to mid 30s for some of these locations, considering you've got humidity values at around 50%, that is going to feel tropical. It's going to be a very muggy day on Friday, and that's also going to equate to some pretty gnarly thunderstorms that are expected to fire up into the Wheatbelt region. The chance of thunderstorms around the Perth metro area on Friday does look pretty minimal at this time. I mean, if they were going to fire up around the Perth metro area, it was going to be yesterday, but again, nothing really fired up, and I think that severe thunderstorm warning was a little bit out of measure for the Perth metro area. I think that was a little bit excessive, but again, it's better to be safe than sorry. Further inland, though, on Friday, plenty of thunderstorms expected to fire up, especially into the northern parts of the Wheatbelt and parts of the Goldfields. Massive thunderstorms expected out there, just typical warm season stuff around the Goldfields. It is going to be a spectacular night for lightning lovers and thunder lovers. There's going to be heaps to talk about as well on the weather forecast over there. It's just going to be a beautiful setup for these thunderstorms. It's going to be something out of southeastern Queensland, and as such, multiple severe thunderstorms are expected across the southwest of Western Australia. And keeping things on Western Australia, looking deeper into the forecast, those tropical lows that we once were very hopeful were going to develop into tropical cyclones around this time, well, they're really dying off at this time. You can see on the satellite picture, tropical low 02U has completely carked out in the Indian Ocean. I mean, it's very hard to tell what this system is actually made of right now, but it does have a few clouds still spinning around its low pressure center, but that is expected to peter out pretty much completely throughout the course of today. And then the other system that we were expecting to begin developing from about today, I mean, offshore from the Kimberley region, you can't even make sense of where it is, and the Bureau of Meteorology has now dropped it from its forecast. I think that is the right move to do. There's now no forecast model that's suggesting that another tropical cyclone is going to follow in tropical low 02U steps, and you can see over the next week or so, nothing expected in the way of tropical activity offshore from Western Australia. You're going to have to head very deep into the Indian Ocean to find that kind of stuff. However, later on into the forecast period, we have had rumbles of activity on both the ECMWF and the GFS forecast model, and what's expected to happen is we'll see another monsoon trough develop across northern parts of the Northern Territory, Queensland and Western Australia from about the 20th of December onwards. Now, this monsoon trough on either end of it is expected to spin up two tropical lows, or at least has the good chance to spin up two individual tropical lows. The West Australian one has never had much backing on the forecast, but you can see by around the 24th and the 25th on Christmas Day, this system does begin to develop into a tropical cyclone. In terms of it being reciprocated between the other forecast models, it'd be a bit of a stretch to say that the GFS is also calling for the same system, but in terms of tropical cyclone activity, I mean, that completely lines up with the forecast here. It's obviously not going to play out in the same way that the ECMWF is suggesting in this forecast right now, but it gives you an idea of what is possible around Christmas time. In terms of tropical cyclone impacts in the West Australian coastline before Christmas time right now, very, very unlikely, bordering on the edge of zero. I don't think it's going to happen at all, but we will need to keep a close eye on the forecast. For the Northern Territory, regardless of what tropical lows form and where they're going to be seeing a boatload of rainfall in the lead up to Christmas over the 4 or 5 day period before Christmas, and then through Christmas and Boxing Day, plenty of rainfall expected to continue up into the Northern Territory, and that will likely cause some problems up there. 300 or 400 millimeters over a 5 day period for some of these locations will, regardless of how flood prone they are, cause some substantial flooding. The Gulf of Carpentaria has also been a little bit of a hotspot for tropical lows on the forecast. We've had a few fire up in previous runs over the past 2 weeks or so, but it looks like the Bureau of Meteorology and the ECMWF are now finally coming to a bit of a conclusion on something that's expected to fire up around Christmas time or just before. Now, this system here still needs a lot more backing from the forecast models until I'll comfortably call it a tropical cyclone problem or a threat to Western Australia, but not to Western Australia, rather, to Queensland and the Northern Territory for locations bordering the Gulf of Carpentaria. But the GFS has also been calling for this system here. In short, there is the chance of a tropical low spinning up sometime around the 22nd to the 25th of December in the Gulf of Carpentaria or into the northern extremities of the Coral Sea. At this time, the chances of it going tropical cyclone are very, very low indeed. They're bordering on the edge of zero, but the Bureau of Meteorology now giving them a 5% chance chance of development, and regardless of development, if a tropical low does develop in the Coral Sea, it's going to drive an awful lot of rainfall ashore into the Cape York Peninsula and cause some substantial flooding problems up there. So we will have to wait and see what's actually going to materialise on the forecast. The Axis G3, or the Bureau of Meteorology's own forecast model, is going to town on a system that's expected to roll down the Cape York Peninsula sometime on the 18th or the 19th, and then roll into the Townsville and Cairns sort of area. Not as a tropical cyclone, but certainly as a substantial rain problem. And you can see on the other forecast models as well, it has been supported. This is certainly a system that I want to look at in greater detail in a future forecast update. The chance of a tropical low sometime off the Cape York Peninsula or into the Gulf of Carpentaria around sort of Wednesday, Thursday or Friday does now look a little bit elevated. I reckon the chances of it probably around sort of the 15 to 30% at this time. So not high, but again not low, and certainly something we should keep an eye on the forecast, and I'll certainly have a detailed forecast update on it tomorrow. So at this time certainly does look a bit interesting, and the chances of it getting to tropical cyclone status, regardless of how it develops, I don't think are very high, just considering the conditions that it's going to be facing. But it certainly will bring some substantial rainfall to the Gulf of Carpentaria areas, the coastline around there, and the Cape York Peninsula. But yeah, a Queensland or a Coral Sea tropical low certainly now does look like a plausible thing to say on the forecast sometime next Wednesday, Thursday or Friday, only a week away now. Of course, I'm saying this not to make anyone panic, but I would like everyone to keep in the back of their heads, especially if you guys live up there, that something is a rumbling and something is now possible on the forecast. And just to wrap this video up, I know this video has gone for a very long time, but you can see temperatures across South Australia and into parts of New South Wales and Queensland expected to skyrocket throughout the course of next week. Just temperatures across Australia in general expected to skyrocket on the lead up to Christmas. You can see up into the mid-40s across Western Australia, and then finally for Christmas time you can see up into the early 40s on Monday in the lead up to Christmas across New South Wales and South Australia, and then into the mid-40s across South Australia on the Christmas Eve, and then on Wednesday, Christmas Day, you're expecting temperatures up into the high 40s and early 50s across interior parts of South Australia. So it's going to be very warm indeed on the lead up to Christmas, and then just after Christmas I'm going to start giving detailed Christmas forecasts as well in terms of temperature and rainfall for all major Australian population centres. And if you want your place to be located to be covered as well in the Christmas weather forecast, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. I'm going to do a nice graphic for it, and they'll be starting from tomorrow. Anyways, that is all that I have time for today. Thank you so much for watching the video to this point. Your support lately has been much appreciated. Again, thank you so much to all of the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now, and I could not run the show without them. Once again, their support is much appreciated as well. But that is all from me today, and I will catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.